I personally have never had anything go viral or like be picked up by some celebrity. I've never been retweeted by Oprah. I've never I mean, I truly I've never got to like take an elevator. It's all been just like kind of climbing the stairs one at a time. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think about that often, when I'm doing something new, because I'm like, the reason that certain things that I've done are successful is because 'cause they've just been around long enough to grow. Like, it's a tree I planted 7 years ago, so it's bigger than it was when I first planted it. And so I think about that a lot with everything that I do. I'm like, there is, um, there's real value in starting today, knowing that that time's gonna pass either way, and you can either wait to get started and start small later, or you can start small now, and after some time passes, like, things grow and they get bigger and they get better, and you get better at things. I'm infinitely better at this now than I was at the beginning. Like, that is an understatement.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Young Adults Today podcast and YouTube channel. I'm Josiah Keneally, one of your hosts, and this is where we talk about reaching young adults in our world. Today, we interview generational researchers, pastors, apologists, thought leaders. Today's conversation is with Stephanie May Wilson. Did you know that you make 85% of life's most valuable and important decisions between your 25th and 35th birthday? Well, we talk with Stephanie about decision making, creating a life you love. She's an author and popular podcaster. We pick her brain on her journey to 7 million downloads. What she shares really encouraged me and Micah. I know it will encourage you as well. Today's episode, stick with us to the end. We've got a special invitation to you as the listener, as a young adult ministry leader. And this conversation is brought to you by our friends at GFA World. Did you know they have a paid apprenticeship program that lasts 6 months? It's ideal for any young adult who's considering a gap year, trying to figure out God's plan for their life, and maybe wrestling with a call to global missions. Well, you can find out more at gfa.org. The link is in the show notes. Now, here's for our conversation with Stephanie May Wilson. Enjoy.
What's up, guys? Hope you're feeling alive right now. I'm Micah Keneally.
I'm Josiah Keneally. We're your hosts. This is the Young Adults Today podcast, where we talk about the faith of the next generation. And today, having a conversation about creating a life that you love. Come on, somebody. Our guest is Stephanie May Wilson. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we are so thrilled. And I say this every time. I don't think I'm going to stop saying it. I selfishly love having another female guest in the conversation and in the podcasting space and room with us today, just because we like to mix it up. And I think sometimes we're heavily saturated with men sometimes in this sphere, but a lot of women in the creativity and just the voice that God is giving women is really beginning to shine and to reach the generation and answer questions that they're wrestling with, leadership things that they're struggling with, and just navigating the elements of life. And today we're going to talk about essentially navigating the creative opportunity that every single one of us has to help create, steward, and design the life that God has given us while loving it in the process. And for those of you who do not know, Miss Stephanie Wilson is an author, a popular podcast host. She helps women take off the pressure of what they think their lives are supposed to look like by now, which is, I think, important, and then intentionally, confidently, and authentically build a life that they actually want to live. And essentially, that sounds like we're going to be swimming against some cultural norms in our thought processes, whether you're male or female tuning in today. So Stephanie, welcome to the show. And for the person who may not know you, and we're just getting to know you right now as well, can you just share a little about your story of your journey of life and where and how you got to where you are today? Where that passion come from specifically about this topic?
Yes. Such a great question. Well, so glad that we can be friends. We just, a couple random things about me. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. My heart and my people, so many of them are still there. So I spent a lot of time in Denver. I'm married to a great guy named Carl. We've been married for almost 10 years, which feels like It like so hard to believe. It just feels like we got married yesterday, but we've been married for almost 10 years and we have just like there aren't words to describe them. We have 3-year-old twin girls, Annie and Quinn, and they are so fun and smart and wild. And so that is like a lot of my day. How I got here though, I didn't really grow up in the church. It wasn't until I was done with college that I met Jesus in the first place. And super long story short, I met Jesus while I hope this is an okay audience for this detail, but while hungover
Mm-hmm.
in the Sistine Chapel of all places. I don't
Mm.
know who goes to the Sistine Chapel hungover other than me, but I did. And it was because I was a dedicated fun haver and a dedicated tourist who was going to make sure to hit all the sites in Rome. And one just happened to follow the other. But it was while I was in the Sistine Chapel that Jesus got my attention and I walked out a believer. So it was pretty crazy.
That is,
Um, so up until that point, I'd been studying journalism in college. That was my chosen field. I could not wait to dive in. But in the process of meeting God and getting to know him, it was almost like one passion just totally eclipsed the other. I say that funny because we just saw an eclipse yesterday.
oh,
Yes,
oh,
we're recording this. Um, but so one really eclipsed the other. And, I don't think that this is always the case that it's sort of like God or your passions. Like, in fact, I think that's rarely the case. But for me, for a season, it was. I really needed, I think God really knew that I needed some time to learn about him and focus on him and just be with him. And that, I'm a ambitious, big dreamer, career oriented person. And so I think that for a minute, just saying, like, hey, let's take this and put this to the side and just spend some time with me, I think was really smart on his part. I don't know if you can say something that God did something that was smart. I mean, everything he does is smart. You know what I mean? And so I, just a few weeks really before I graduated college, I just set aside all of my plans to be a journalist. I set aside my college degree. They gave it to me and I was like, thanks, I'm not going to use this. And started out in a ministry role as an unpaid intern at my college ministry.
wow.
And my job at the ministry was I was leading a sorority small group. I was like the only person on staff that had been in a sorority. So I was the only person who like spoke Greek life language. And so they put me in charge of this small group, and there were like almost 30 girls in this small group. So it wasn't small at all. It was amazing. And that was my favorite thing I'd ever done. I loved women's ministry. I loved getting to be this like big sister, best friend kind of figure who was like just a step and a half ahead of the people who were in there with me, but I could sort of facilitate conversations about, like, how are we doing and what do we need? And okay, I learned this like, 6 months ago. Does anyone need this? And it turns out the answer is usually yes. Um, and so I did that for a year and I loved it. And I thought I would do it forever. I was researching seminaries. I was like, I am going to be a college pastor. That is my calling. And then I got the opportunity to travel around the world for a year doing ministry, doing missions. And I am such a traveler, I just could not turn it down. So I again like peeled my fingers off of this, kind of newly formed dream of what I thought I was going to do with my life, and instead packed a backpack and traveled around the world for a year. And part of the deal, though, in traveling around with this organization is that they gave you a blog. They said, just keep track of what you're doing, share it with your people. It's good for fundraising, it's good for marketing. And I'm a total rule follower. And so I said, okay, like I'll keep this blog. And it was amazing because it was this really beautiful combination of journalism and women's ministry. And they all came together. And that was 12 years ago. And really, I mean, I'm still doing it. That blog, it's sort of that small group now exists online, basically. It's the same heart, but just a different format. And it's turned into a podcast and a bunch of books and journals and courses and all kinds of things. And it really it's cool because I have a book coming out in just a few weeks, and it's called Create a Life You Love, and it is all of these stories and so many more of times when this type A rule follower, second guesser came to points in life where I could either do the thing that was like you're supposed to do, or I could I don't know, think a little bit more broadly and think a little bit more personally and make maybe a different decision. And I always have a hard time doing it, but every time I've done it, it's turned out really, really beautifully for me. So that is like my whole life story in a nutshell. There we
That's
go.
awesome.
Amazing. Stephanie, what campus were you, where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Okay, makes sense. What campus ministry?
It wasn't a national one. It was just the college ministry that was affiliated with a Presbyterian church that when I wasn't Presbyterian, I didn't grow up in church, and so I wasn't really anything. But it was a really awesome college ministry that came out of this Presbyterian church, and that's what I got to be a part of.
I love it.
Awesome.
We were both young adult pastors at different churches, and then we did campus ministry prior to launching Young Adults Today as a nonprofit. And so there's some overlap and just shared passion. And even prepping for this conversation, looking at some of your material, one of the things that you've printed or published just caught my attention. It just said, did you know that 80% of our life's most defining moments or experience they happen between age 25 and 35. Talk about that for a second.
Oh my gosh. So that is it comes from a study out of Boston University and the University of Michigan, and they did this rare study of lifespan development. And they found that the 80% of our life's most defining moments happen before we turn 35. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like there's no way that's true. And I started digging into it a little bit more and realized, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But there's something really significant about 25 because I think, from birth until about 25, we're all just kind of figuring it out. We're like, throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to see what sticks. I talk about it like bowling with bumpers. There's like, no one really expects you to have your life figured out until 25-ish. And then it's almost like, and I say ish because there's variety here, but for a lot of us, we wake up somewhere around 25-ish, and it's like we go from having all the time in the world to figuring out our life to all of a sudden being behind. And it's like all of a sudden everyone's engaged, or all of a sudden like people are starting to have kids, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought that we were just like post grads, and it changes kind of overnight. And I'd felt that pressure in that time in my life. I'd felt like, man, it feels like I'm trying to figure out my whole life all at the same time. And the more research I did, the more I realized like the average, and I mostly talk to women, but like the average woman makes so many of her like biggest, most life defining, biggest plot point, in her life story decisions between 25 and 35. It's when you're figuring out who you are and who you want to share your life with and where you want to live and who your people are and if you want to be married and if you want to have kids. And for women, there's a whole other layer because our like bodies aren't as I'm so mad that this is the case. So it's hard to even talk about. But like we have a biological clock that men don't have in exactly the same way. And so it really does make this 25 to 35 season of life a pretty serious crunch. And I've felt that for years. I've talked to women about it for years, but I've never really had a name for it. And so the more research I did, the more I was like, well, someone has to like have a name for this. It has to be, I don't know, but it's not your post-grad years. It's not a quarter life crisis because it's not really quarter life necessarily. It's not midlife. Like, what is this? I couldn't find a name for it. And so I decided to make one up, and I call it the everything era. And it's this season of life where you have to make some of your most significant life decisions all at the same time in a super short period of time, and in front of an audience that has a bazillion opinions about the right and the wrong way to do it. And so that's really like, I'm going to be talking about that forever, the everything era. And really that's what my book is all about, is like how this time frame got established, what this has looked like for generations past, like what I think for a lot of the decisions we're making, it feels like even if we don't have someone weighing in, like I've been to several weddings where one of the parents of the bride or groom says something about grandkids in the speech. They're like, and now we're waiting for grandkids, like in front of all their family and friends. And they're like, okay, so that's some pressure. And even if you don't have people really putting pressure on you to get married or have kids or whatever, that there's still that pressure that exists. And I always wondered where that came from. And so I started to kind of do some research, like what have the expectations been like on women in particular throughout history? Like, why does it feel like this is how it has to be, even if no one's really saying this is how it has to be? So that's a lot of thoughts.
You call it the everything era, Stephanie, and we call it young adulting. And it's the idea is the same. It is just this intersection of rush hour traffic where one author calls it the defining decade, but it is such a
Meg Jay is my podcast guest for this week of my podcast. I'm obsessed with her.
let's go.
She's amazing.
Let's go.
That's so good. And Stephanie, I love that you even talked about the 25 to 35, because I think I've come across so many women that feel behind in life, feel like their biological clock is ticking, feel like they're missing the mark. And for those of them who are married, it's like, okay, now I have the mom guilt of I want to work and I want to be fully satisfied in the workforce and I want to be fully satisfied in my marriage and home life. But they seem to be playing at odds with each other because we only have so many hours in a day, only so many hours in a week. And I even experienced this. I don't know if you can relate. We have a 2 and a 3-year-old. And so they're very close, 2 daughters in age. And I've really wrestled with like the first 2.5 years of our 3-year-old being born of like, okay, when I'm at work, I feel like I'm guilty because I'm not with her. When I'm with her, I feel guilty because there's so much passion in me to get work done, to reach a generation that needs to know Jesus. But my child needs to know Jesus. Like there's this weird tension that's playing at odds with each other. And for women who've gone before us, who maybe been able to, I don't know, navigate and uncover and discover what worked for them, because it's not a one size fits all. We want to believe that, but it's like, that works for you, but this does not work for me. And so for the 25 to 35-year-old who may be figuring it out, but what about the 18 to 24-year-old? Like, why do you believe that reaching the next generation through discipleship and mentorship is so vital in this day and age? And how can we link arms with the generations that have gone before us to learn from the women who've, maybe are 1.5 steps ahead, like you had said earlier, were like those 30 girls that you were able to lead. How do we navigate giving back to a season that maybe we are no longer in, but we do have experience with?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. I think one of the most powerful things for me in every decision and transition and like big pivotal moment in my life has been women who are patient enough to let me ask them questions. Like, and whether it's a mentor, whether it's a friend's mom, whether it's the mom of kids I babysit for, whether it's, the intern at church, whether it's the pastor, like, whoever it is, being able to ask them questions has just been so life-changing because they have perspective I don't have. I think that, uh, I honestly feel like one of my, or maybe my main spiritual gift is that I don't forget what it felt like to be in previous seasons. Like I just don't. And I'm so grateful for that because it allows me to remember like, oh no, I know how it feels to XYZ. And I think that we all can have that though. We can all tap into like, really before I knew how this was going to turn out, I was really scared. Or like before I was really lonely or I was really unsure, or like these are the questions that I was asking God when I was like, hello, is this ever going to change? And so I think when we can kind of tap into like, hey, remember how that felt? Like, yes, you do. You remember how it felt. And and I think one of the things that holds us back as the ones who are, a step and a half down the road is we feel like we have to have everything figured out. And we feel like we have to be able to take someone perfectly from A to Z in their journey. And it's like, no, no, no. Your job is like B to C. Like that's it. You don't need to know anything about the second half of the alphabet. You just need to like help women through B to C because that was a particularly tricky step of the journey for you. One of the things I think about all the time, there's this quote that I don't know where it originated, but I wish I did. It says, be who you needed when you were younger.
Yeah.
And that just guides like everything that I do. So whatever your season, your tricky span of road has been in your life, if it's been singleness, if it's been a particular struggle, if it's been insecurity, if it's been figuring out what you want to do for work, if it's been trying to get pregnant, like whatever the thing is for you, because you walked through that, you are specifically equipped to help someone else through that exact same thing. So you don't need to have your whole life figured out or be able to like treat infertility, but you can say, you know what, I remember how it felt to be there, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
And Stephanie, what you just said there reminds me of, it's been said that smart people learn from their own mistakes, and maybe they don't make the same mistake twice, but wise people learn from other people's mistakes. I would say that mentors are those who've taken notes in the dark seasons of their life, the dark nights of the soul, and then they're willing to share those through questions or through conversations to just say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but when I was stuck in the dark, here's some notes that helped me, and maybe it can help you. It reminds me of like this past week, we got a trampoline that was given to our family, and some assemblies required. And it's just like, we're trying to figure.
Was it a lot of assembly?
Oh, for sure. It was like a full-blown shoulder workout putting this thing together. And it's set up ready to rock and roll for spring, summer, fall here in Minnesota. But like putting that trampoline together, I stumbled across the YouTube video, and it was like the same size, same measurements, different brand. And I was like, there we go. Like, just somebody else took notes while they were in the dark, and they made a video documentary of it, and it saved me time. And I think that is young adulting. I think that is both being smart to say, like, I'm going to make mistakes. So I'm going to try not to make the same mistake twice, but I'm going to be wise enough to ask people who've gone before me, hey, and do you have any do you have any epic fails you'd be willing to share? Because I found that in mentorship with like ministry, let's just say, for example, I could have a 30-minute coffee or phone call with one of my mentors, and in those 30 minutes, they saved me like 3 years of headache and heartache.
1,000%. 1,000%.
And I think that's our hope for the listener, and even why this podcast exists. We know that it's a shared passion for you. But speaking of like content creation or podcasting, you're on a journey with, I think your podcast is called the Girls Night Podcast. Mm-hmm. And you've crossed over 7 million downloads. Share some wisdom from your journey with us and the listener.
It's so crazy. I think that there is, I love Girls Night. I love Girls Night because of exactly what you just said, where a 30-minute conversation with a mentor can save you 3 years of heartache. And that's what Girls Night is. Like, the stereotypical idea of Girls Night is like popcorn and gossip and, painting your nails and stuff. That is so reductive. Like, it's so much more than that. We're solving the world's problems at our Girls Nights. When groups of women get together, the amount of wisdom that they pass back and forth and support and encouragement is like truly like saving you years and years and years. The amount that I've learned from my girlfriends is just, you're tapping into the collective wisdom of women. And you're also learning that you don't have to do things alone. And I think that like, no matter what you're doing, not doing it alone, like that just makes everything so much easier. So that's why I created Girls Night, because I was like, I'm having conversations with people that are changing my life just over dinner. And I wish I could share this with everybody else. And so finally I just like turned on a microphone and was like, well, let's try it. But when it comes to, it growing so much, I will say, like, that's been over years, I've been doing it for a really long time. And I personally have never had anything go viral or like be picked up by some celebrity. I've never been retweeted by Oprah. I've never I've never got to like take an elevator. It's all been just like kind of climbing the stairs one at a time. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think about that often, when I'm doing something new, because I'm like, the reason that certain things that I've done are successful is because they've just been around long enough to grow. Like, it's a tree I planted 7 years ago, so it's bigger than it was when I first planted it. And so I think about that a lot with everything that I do. I'm like, there is, there's real value in starting today, knowing that that time is going to pass either way. And you can either wait to get started and start small later, or you can start small now. And after some time passes, like things grow and they get bigger and they get better and you get better at things. I'm infinitely better at this now than I was at the beginning. Like that is an understatement.
That is gold. My goodness. Right there.
I love that you even went there, because even I'm taking notes as you're talking, and just like when you gather those women and you talk and have a girls' night, like many women are asking, where do I start? Like I just was on a phone call mentoring a girl yesterday for an hour, and she's like, Micah, I rededicated my life to the Lord. Like, where do I start? And she's like, I don't enjoy history. I don't enjoy reading. I don't like, how do I grow my relationship with Jesus? Like all these like basic questions. And she's like, I'm drinking milk. Like she's very aware of like where she's at, but she also says, Micah, but I want to be on fire for the Lord. Like I want to be that person that people say, I want what she has. So it's like when you get in rooms with women who like now covet what each other have, but like want what's best for each other in that process, like that's just a beautiful thing. So you're setting a table for people that are saying, where do I start? Who's been here? What do I need to do? And how can I make it my own in the season that I'm in? And how can we glorify God in that process? And I just want to say thank you for sticking with it. Like we can look at you now and be like, we just met you, like you have 7.2 million, like that's awesome. And it is reaching people, yes. But Bianca Olhoff wrote a book called Grit, Don't Quit. And I feel like I know that we just met, but I'm like, there's some grit in you that you didn't quit in the process. And so many people, I love that you said, like, I didn't get to take an elevator. It's just one step at a time. And I think that we really live in a day and age where we are microwavable Christians instead of crock pot Christians. Like we should be like, okay, Lord, you told me this dream's going to happen. Let's put it in the microwave. Why aren't we there yet? Okay, God spoke that 24 hours ago. If you read the word of God, you turn a page, it's 100 years later. Like, so
Yeah.
stick with what God has placed in your hands. So I love that you went there. But for the person who's maybe tuning in, they're really like, oh my gosh, how do I live the best life? Like, how do I truly start that process? Or how do I discover and uncover what God has? What is the best advice that you may have today to live a life you love? Like, how do we even start that? What advice do you have for us?
So, the thing that I think is really unique about this book and the position I get to take in it, which I really love, is that I may be one of the only people that doesn't care what you decide to do. Like, I truly don't care. I don't have a horse in the race. I'm not your mom. I'm not your sister. We're not talking about my future nieces or nephews. If we were, I would have lots of opinions. We're like, it really, I'm in your corner. And so I really like to be able to be that kind of impartial voice, because I think we just don't have that very often. We have a lot of books out there that are like, here's how I build a life I love and how you can build one exactly like it. And this book is about a little bit about how I've built a life I love and about how you can build a life you love too, but not a life that looks like mine, a life that looks like you. Um, I come back to this example all the time, and it's so silly. So I actually think we took it out of the book, but so it's not in there anymore, I don't think. But I use it all the time, so maybe we should have left it. But when I think about creating a life you love, I think that there's something that like catches in us when we hear that. We're like, am I supposed to love my life? Like, is that allowed? Is that encouraged? Like, it kind of feels like that's like either too idealistic or sort of selfish or something like that. And then also, we all have all kinds of circumstances that we cannot control and like things we have to do in a day. And so, yes, that's true. There are all kinds of things that we can't control about our lives, but there are a lot of things where we do have some say. And the category of these things is like what we're not talking about is taking our lives out of God's hands and being like, see ya, God, like I don't care about glorifying you. I only care about living, like loving my life. We're talking about the category of things where God's like, kiddo, I don't really care what you decide to do here. Like, I'm not going to strike you down if you pick the wrong university. Like, you can pick University A, University B. I'll be there with both. You can
Right.
pick job A, job B. I'll be with you in both. You can even marry person A or person B. I will love you and I will help you in both. which is really uncomfortable because then we're like, well, shoot, like now I have to figure this out. And the silly example I always give is like, most of us, unless you are like, I don't know, maybe some people don't, but most of us wear pants like on a regular basis, right?
Mhm.
We kind of have to wear pants like out in public, but you don't have to wear those pants. Like you don't have to wear the pants in your closet that don't fit you anymore, or that you bought and it was a mistake and you like didn't take them back soon enough, so now you just own them and you can never return them. You don't have to wear pants that are itchy or too big or too small or a color you hate. Um, you don't have to wear the same pants every day. You can switch it up. You can wear the same pair of pants for a year and switch it up later and do something totally different. And that's true with our lives as well. Our lives, we have so much more say over them, ways that we can customize them to fit us. And I think that we need to exercise that authority, because if we don't, somebody else will. Like we'll
Mhm.
either just sort of trip into a life that we're like, well, here I am and I hate this and I don't know how I got here, or we'll follow all the rules and realize that we are at the end of a road that we totally didn't choose, that looks nothing like us. We'll follow, the path that so and so set out for us and build a life that looks like them. And I think that we just really miss out when we don't take an um active role in like choosing our pants in our life.
Totally.
Same is true for our lives.
And when you talk about choosing your pants and the empowerment of free will that God's given us to make decisions and to be confident, I'm
Mhm.
reminded of how David tries on Saul's armor. And it's
Mm.
just like, you know what? This doesn't fit. This is not me. And we see it in our vantage point working with young leaders all the time, where they're trying to be Stephen Furtick or Craig Rochelle or Bishop Jakes or whoever it is. And really, God is calling them to be their unique voice. We see it even on a show that Micah and I enjoy from time to time is American Idol.
Mhm.
And the songs that just hit or just slap or just resonate, it's as if the singer-songwriter has written it themselves, whether they wrote it themselves or it just so deeply tells their story that it brings the judges like Katy Perry or Lionel Richie to have goosebump feels, or they're brought to tears. And I think that there's something about being who God made us to be
Mhm.
set free to, yeah, you might try on some different pants or jackets or armor. Or, I mean, I remember taking an internship at 18 years old, freshman year of college. And I thought, you know what? I've seen the car that my parents' financial advisor drives. I have an idea of his income level. That sounds great. And I interned there for 3 months. And I'm a people person. So the amount of paperwork and projects, it was just like,
In
oh
the
my
dark room,
gosh,
no people.
no, thank you. And that's where it was like one of the most freeing experiences. That internship and season came to a conclusion. And I learned that that's not the life that I love. And I saw this, I think it was a meme or a tweet. And it kind of had this picture of like, and it said something like follow your dreams, but then it was like crossed out and it said follow God's plan for your life. And I see where the artist or creator was going with it,
Mhm.
but I'm drawn now from a John Piper quote that says God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. And I think the biggest mistake that we make as Christians sometimes is thinking that our dreams are separate from what glorifies God, when
Mhm.
a lot of times it's like, man, he's created you, he's wired you with certain passions and stories and skill sets and abilities to be who he's called you to be. And so I just want to come alongside what you're saying, Stephanie, double down on that and
Yeah.
encourage the listener. But hey, are you up for the 5 and 5 where we throw 5 minutes on the clock, ask you a little bit rapid fire questions? Are you up for that today?
I am. I am. Hit me. Let's do it.
Ooh, okay. Question number one. Best book you've read this year so far?
This year's been a little tricky because I've been doing a ton of book research. So the books that I'm not in a great place to recommend all the books that I've been reading for the last year. But one of my favorite authors in the world is Shauna Niequist.
Mhm.
She is just the most beautiful writer. She lives so beautifully and she captures it in her words. And like, I don't know that there's another person I've been as inspired by as I have her. So all of her books, just get them all, read all of them, and they're amazing.
Awesome.
Love it. That's so cool. What's a hobby that if you get a day off or a night out, what are you guys doing for fun?
I'm also a people person. Like my friends are my everything. I love time with my friends. And so I also really love good food, not cooking it, really only eating it. So if I could go to like a new restaurant with my best friends, that would be like just the best. Food and friendship are two of my favorite things.
So question 2.5, Mike and I have a trip later this fall, I think it is, to Nashville. Where's a spot that we should go for good eats?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm kind of unprepared for this. And now this is
It's
such an important
script.
question.
Like, there's
Such an
100
important
places,
question.
just choose one.
Oh, this is so hard. Okay, hang on. One thing that's really pretty cool, kind of overrun with tourists, but okay, is there's something called the Assembly Food Hall, and it's right off of Broadway. It's right downtown. And it's a food court, but like a big one. And it has all the like stalls are actual local Nashville spots. So it's like you have Prince's Hot Chicken, which is like a staple and, like Nashville history. But they have a stall there. You have, gosh, like some of the best Thai in Nashville. They have a stall there. Best tacos in Nashville. They have a stall there. So it's a way for you to like get the tour de food in Nashville without having to go to like 15 different restaurants. It's pretty cool.
That's good. I wrote it down.
I'm excited. I've been there, but Micah has not, so I'll get to bring her there. That just went up a notch.
Ooh, here we go.
Especially when you said Thai. She loves Thai.
I love Thai.
I love Thai. If you want a really good Thai, Smiling Elephant. It's just this kind of like little house, kind of built into a weird hill, but it's been there forever and it's really good. So Smiling Elephant. Great.
Fun name too. That's fascinating. All right. So question number 3, here's a fun one. This is the curveball. Stephanie, if you could ask Josiah and myself any question that you'd want to know about ministry, life, anything, what would you ask us today?
Oh gosh, this is a curveball. If you could go back and talk to your 25-year-old self, I have no idea how old you guys are. Are you over 25?
Yeah. We are.
Okay, great. If you could same. If you could go back and talk to your 25-year-old self, what's like the one message you would tell him and her?
At 25, I was still single. I think I would tell myself, let's see here, a couple of things, but don't lean into what God has and don't be afraid of the process. I think sometimes when we hear something from the Lord, we shy back and we freak out like, oh Lord, you want me to do this? And it's like, if he would tell us everything, if he began with the end of our life in mind by exposing it to us, we'd just be freaked out. You know what I mean? At 90, what would be said of me? I'm like, I don't know. I'm only 25. But I think just to lean into what God has in the season and don't wish seasons away, because I think I'm futuristic. So I always think like, what's next? What's next? And it's like, okay, singleness is now. How can I best utilize my singleness to glorify God and to live every moment like it were my last? And I think once you get married, you look back fondly on singleness because you're like, whoa, I had so much time. And then you have kids. It's like when Paul writes that your time is divided, you don't understand that until you're in it. And you can hypothetically theorize what that is, what could feel like. But when you're in it, you're like, whoa, I wish I would have just been okay with being okay. And there's nothing wrong with you at 25, you're single and not married. So I think just not wishing seasons away is probably the overarching theme while still dreaming, and planning. But
man, this is a good question. What I think I would tell my 25-year-old self is learn to be. And I'm driven, I'm wired to produce, and whether it's write books or create podcasts or do the work of the ministry or invest in people or spend time with people, I would tell my younger self, learn to be. One of the things that the psalmist wrote is be still and know that I am God. And it's so easy in today's world to err towards burnout or workaholism. And I'm not there, but Brady Boyd calls it an addiction to busy. I'm learning, like, is there an addiction to adrenaline that I have found or stumbled on? And another person that we've had as a guest on this show is Susie Larson. She noticed a trend among all the young leaders or all the pastors she's interviewed on her radio show. She goes, Josiah, these leaders, they strive and try to produce all through their 20s and 30s. They hit 40, they burn out, then they want to write a book about burnout. And so I'm just trying to learn at 32 how to be. And one of the voices who I've invited as a mentor to speak into our life, he nominated us for a grant. And one of the things that the application said is, when's the last time that you took 2 weeks off consecutively? And this boom of conviction just hit me, and I go, honest answer, never. And so we're working with an outside voice and also the board of our nonprofit to just like, when are we going to take a break? For me, it'll be a break from social media, a break from work, and maybe even a break from being here and travel somewhere. But we're asking those questions that I think the overarching theme is, how do I be?
And what are those rhythms? Probably, right?
For sure. Not just
rhythm.
Because I think so many of the podcasts or books or blogs that I've devoured, it's like, how do you do? And instead, I think the Spirit has guided me to like learn to be. So, killer question.
That's so good.
Thanks for asking it. Back to you. What's one place that you guys would want to travel for fun?
Well, so this is pretty crazy, but the place where my soul rests more than any other is Spain, actually. I studied abroad in Spain in college, which is how I was in the Sistine Chapel over spring break. That's how that all happened. But I love Spain, and I have always wanted to live there again. And so through a whole series of decisions and moments and crazy things, and I actually talk about it in the book, my family is moving to Spain in just about 3 months.
Whoa.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to start with a year, see how it goes, go from there. But we're going to just pick up, and my work's going to come with me. My husband's work's going to come with him. We're going to take our 3-year-olds, and we're going to go live in Spain for a while.
That is awesome.
The comment that I have about that is, it's one thing, I think, to theoretically say like, hey, you can create a life that you love, but for you to come out and say, you know what, our next step in creating a life that we love is we're going to discover this passion for travel, this passion for work and ministry, and we're going to give it a shot and start with a year. One of the things that we learned in campus ministry is and you did this, you lived this, is give God a year, pray about a lifetime.
Oh, I love that. I have not heard that. That's, I think, one of the things that I talk about in the book so much is like, very little of this is permanent. Like, you can try something, and you should try something, like your example with your internship. Like, how in the world would you have known that you didn't like finance if you didn't try that? And it's like, someone could look at that and go, well, okay, well, you wasted 3 months, like you should have, whatever. And it's like, no, you saved a lifetime by giving 3 months and going, oh, nope, not this. I love that. You can do so many different things. You can try them, and you just don't know until you try. And you can always change it. Like, if we hate it, we'll come back. But I kind of don't think we're going to.
I love that. It's definitely like, I think about this, like, there are dreamers and doers, but rarely are there dreamers that do. And I think that you're demonstrating, even in this book, of just talking about, like, you can dream all you want, but until you start doing and living out that dream, it's never going to actually happen. So I think of just even like a kayak. I always get this vision of like this kayak. One paddle is the dreaming, one paddle is the doing. If we're only doing and we're never dreaming, we're spinning in a circle. If we're only dreaming and never doing, we're spinning in the other direction. But when we get that paddle right, and we're on the rapids, and we're looking due north, like we're following the plan that God has, we're like, we don't know what's ahead. We don't know what rapids, or we can hit some 4s, 5s. I don't know if we're going to barrel roll this thing or not. But if we're dreaming and doing, we're propelling towards something instead of lying marooned on an island, wondering when God's going to show up and do something wild and crazy. Sometimes that wild and crazy free will, that's where it comes into play. Like, we all want this adventure until we're faced with the free will decisions. And then we're like at a crux of like, oh my gosh, this alternate book ending. What if I make the wrong decision? Guess what? A lot of the time when you're in a boat, streams are coming and you might reroute on some things, but you know what? You might end up in the same place. It just may took a little longer to get there, or maybe took a shortcut and you save some time. So I love that you're a dreamer and a doer, and you're teaching your young daughters how to do that with Alpha Generation. But a last and final question before we wrap up our time with you. If you could leave the listener with one word of encouragement, what would you want to leave them with today?
I just have to say, I love that kayak picture. That's going to stick with me forever. That is so great.
That's awesome. That's good.
Yeah, that's so good. If I could leave you with one piece of encouragement, I mean, I would say there's just not one right way to build a life. Like a beautiful life is not one size fits all. Um, it's just not. And so often people make it seem like it is. Like if you follow this series of steps, you'll get to this one ideal outcome. But like we all, going back to the pants thing, like this isn't Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. We all have different body sizes. Like, so it's not, one pair of pants is not going to fit all of us the same. And so it's not selfish or silly or entitled or any of those things to want to find a life that fits you. And so just like, there's just not one right way to do this. You're not going to mess it, which means you can't really mess it up.
Yes.
You're not going to mess it up. And I love that kayak picture. Dream and do. And like, if you get turned around somewhere, like you can turn back. It's fixable.
Yeah, totally.
Gosh, I feel myself just a liberty, a permission slip, if you will, to dream, a permission slip to try. And whether it's try and fail, try and learn, try and try again. I just love the message of hope and encouragement that is creating a life that you love, because look, we all get one shot at life. And I think we'd all agree that it's a little bit too short to wonder what if. It's a little bit too short, like centenarians and 90-year-olds, people who lived into their 90s and hundreds were interviewed. And this is out there on the internet. You can research it, but they were asked kind of towards the end of their life, most likely on earth, what are your greatest regrets? And the number one thing across the board was they wish they would have taken some more risk. And so what is risking with God? What is risking for God? What is dreaming and doing look like for you today? Take some time to think about it. Visit with a friend, a mentor, a trusted loved one, or your small group. You know, the small group that I'm a part of, we quarterly, we do a morning with guys where we call it Plan, Vision, Dream. And normally it's a Bible study. We go through SOAP and we go through promise principle. Is this, what is God commanding you or promising you, or what's a truth that you find in his word? But quarterly, we just take a day and we're like, everyone gets to either share a plan, a vision, or a dream. And my hope for you as the listener, just coming off of what Stephanie's saying, is to take some time, get alone with God. What's his plan for your life? What's a dream or a vision that you have, and share it with some of your community. Maybe it's a guy's night, maybe it's a girl's night. But Stephanie, we just want to thank you so much for today's conversation.
This was awesome. You guys are great. I'm so glad we got to connect. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And just for the listener, what if you lived a life with nothing to lose and everything to gain? Just think about that thought, challenge we want to leave you on today, as well as ourselves, when you're listening to the Young Adults Today podcast.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Josiah, and I just want to invite you this August 15th and 16th right here to Irvine, California. It's beautiful here. We're at Mariners Church, and this is our location for the West Coast Leaders Conference, and it won't be the same without you here. And there's going to be times where you can meet new friends that can last a lifetime in ministry together, learn about generations and practical young adult ministry leadership training. There'll be times of roundtable, praying together, checking out Thursday nights at Mariners, which is the Thursday night young adult service here. And I'm just telling you, there's a buy one, get one free deal. The link is in the show notes. And bring your team, come. I can't wait to see you here in Irvine, California this August.